So I rewatched the Fishman Island arc, y'all, and I can't lie. I concluded that this arc is overhated. This arc is really, really good, y'all. In my personal opinion, you get so much lore behind it with Joy Boy, Sherry Horsey being Poseidon, the ancient weapon. Her, being able to control the sea kings. You get the Madam Shirley prediction, or she looked in the crystal ball and saw the prediction of Luffy destroying Fishman Island. You get the backstory, the great, honestly, it's one of the best backstories in all of One Piece. The Fisher Tiger and Queen Orihime backstory. With the Sun Pirates, you get to see Jinbei and Arlong. And I think Hardy Jones is an overhated villain, in my opinion. He's not the strongest villain, and I know that's one of the biggest criticisms of him is his strength and the reason of what he's doing. He doesn't really have a reason of why he hates humans. And I get that's the biggest criticism, but I think that is a misunderstanding of the character of Hardy Jones, which kind of leads me to saying Hardy Jones is really not the main antagonist of this arc. It is really hatred itself. If y'all remember, Fukaboshi asked Hardy what humans did to him, and he basically says nothing, right? And Fukaboshi is all surprised and stuff like that because he realized Hardy Jones is a monster that was created by unchecked hatred of humans that was looming around Fishman Island, right? This is where most people have a problem with Hardy Jones' character, right? It's because his hatred doesn't come from a traumatic experience that happened in his childhood, right? It's based off his environment. He built off his ideologies off like teachings and the environment he was surrounded in. It's not based off a real experience like many One Piece villains have, right? You don't have no sympathy for him, right? Because of that. Kind of meant that way based off like all the flashbacks and stuff, like what, the meaning of the flashback of protecting the children. Hatred doesn't always come from experience, right? It could be taught to you by teachings, or it could be observed by watching others' actions, right? So that's other ways that hatred can be put in somebody else, especially as a child, right? When you still growing into the person that you're trying to be, right? You see examples of this in his, in Hardy Jones' backstory, where you have all along teaching hatred of humans to Hardy Jones and the new Fishman Pirates, right? Then you also hear within that flashback, he hears a statement, and then it is resonated with. It stays with him throughout his whole adult life too, all the way to his adult life, because he constantly recites this phrase throughout this whole arc. Fishermen are the superior race to humans, right? He hears this many times in that flashback, right? And then you see later on as an adult, he's constantly speaking about that, right? That fishermen are the superior race. He says this multiple times in the current time of that Fishman Island arc, and it's all the stuff that he experienced through his childhood, right? It's not direct human experience. It's more of a passing on, right? So it got passed on by unchecked stuff. Like you have all along teaching it, right? And seeing other adults speaking about it as well. And that's how he built his ideology from, right? It's based off that environmental exposure, right? And that's where people don't understand that character. That's like the whole topic of Fisher Tiger and Queen Odahime's flashback of protecting the children from passing on hatred. Ultimately, Fisher Tiger and Queen Odahime had different ideologies, but they both realized that the only way hatred between humans, fishermen, could go away would be the children of the next generation. But Hardy Jones is an example of what both those figures feared, hatred getting passed down to children. That's why it was so important that King Neptune shut down the Fishman District, right? Like one of the highlights of that ending of the Fishman Island arc was King Neptune shutting down the Fishman District, so another Hardy Jones was not created, right? And people don't really see that message, and they criticize the arc of Hardy not having real experience, but the whole premise of that arc the whole time is thrown in our face constantly, especially in the Fisher Tiger and Queen Odahime flashback. Protect the children. Both of them said that through that whole flashback multiple times, even though they had different ideologies. They had different, ways of doing, good for fishermen, but they constantly repeated that protect the children, do not pass down hatred. And this is exactly what they were trying to prevent with Horty Jones, right? So that's the real main concept of Horty Jones, the villain. That's why I say Horty Jones is the main antagonist, but he's really not, right? It's hatred itself. Now, y'all, I kind of want to jump into the Horty Jones strength criticism. Now, this criticism doesn't really make sense because it makes too much sense that the Straw Hats would be stronger than Horty Jones and the New Fishman Pirates. It just makes a lot more sense that they would be, because if they struggled with them after the 2-year time skip, it would have meant that the Straw Hats still wasn't ready for the new world, right? Because people forget that Fishman Island is the gateway to the new world. It's not in the new world. It's like it's the gateway between the first half of the Grand Line and the new world, basically, right? And so it's not in the new world, right? So Horty Jones and the New Fisherman Pirates are not a new world threat. So this whole arc was really about showing the progression of the Straw Hats and proving that they were ready for the new world, right? That's basically what this arc is about. And still to this day, I still believe Horty Jones and the New Fishman Pirates would have packed up the Straw Hats before the 2-year training arc, right? So like if the Straw Hats went and then they ain't had a 2-year time skip training arc, they would have got packed up by Horty and the new Fishman Pirates. So it makes more sense, in my opinion, in this point of the story, to why the Straw Hats would be so much stronger than the New Fishman Pirates, right? It wouldn't have made no sense to why it would have made no sense if they went out there and struggled, right? It'd be like, if they went out there and struggled, well, like, what is the 2-year time skip for, right? The whole reason that we had this 2-year training time skip is so they wouldn't go out there and struggle against threats like this, right? And that's why I don't have too much of a criticism of why Horty Jones is not as as strong or as a big enough threat as some of the other villains that we get later in the new world, right? It's basically a setup to show, hey, the Straw Hats are ready. They're gonna be a problem in the new world. They're ready for the challenges of the new world, right? The challenges of Doflamingo and Kaido and Big Mom and stuff like that. They see later in the story. The Fisher Tiger and Queen Orihime flashback is straight peak, y'all. It is my favorite part of the Fishman Island arc, and in my personal opinion, I think it's the best part of the arc. You get so much information in the flashback, y'all. Getting to see a young Arlong, it brought more context and layers to his character. It was very interesting to see that he built Arlong Park off of Sabaody Park, man, so that his longing of being in the human world as a kid kind of showed in his adult life with Arlong Park, right? Building of Arlong Park. So although he was cruel to humans, he had a longing to be close to the humans, which is very interesting there, and very interesting to see how his character comes back into the story. Like, it's one of my things I'm looking forward to, anticipating, is when Arlong come back in the story, man. You get so he can see, I guess, Koala, because she's a part of that flashback, Jinbei and Nami, just to see that interaction. Them 4 interaction is going to be very interesting. It's going to probably be sad and tearful and all that stuff. So I'm looking forward just seeing what happens and how it unfolds. And Arlong was a great villain in my opinion, man, and getting to see the layers was also very, very good as well. And I want to mention that I did notice something in the flashback with him and Fisher Tiger, where I think people don't think Fisher Tiger and Arlong are very similar, but I think they are very similar, man. There are some similarities between the two. In my opinion, they are like, different sides of the same coin. And I want to jump into that in a separate video, man, because I think it's not something that is talked about, that they are very similar. They got that same deep-rooted hate, although they showed it differently, in a sense, the hate for humans differently, right? And they just chose different paths in life. So I'm definitely gonna make a video on that, because I'm excited to talk about that, because I noticed something in that flashback watching it again. Oh, y'all, I forgot to mention about Arlong, is that he's probably a slave by the Celestial Dragons in the Holy Land there, y'all, which is gonna be very interesting as the story unfolds, when he comes back into the story, because I'm assuming he's gonna have an ideology change or like a different mindset then, which is gonna be very interesting. It's probably gonna be a very emotional moment between Arlong, Nami, Jinbei, and Koala. Like I said, I'm looking forward to this moment. Another peak moment in the backstory is Queen Odahime being able to change the celestial dragon Mosgard, which is very interesting because you see later in the story, the outcome of that where he protects Shirahoshi. He don't got no slaves or nothing like that. So he's very different from the other celestial dragon, which brings to an interesting topic. I would say, will other celestial dragons change? You know what I'm saying? Y'all feel what I'm saying? Would they change or betray Emu later in the story? That's what I'm thinking about. Like, will others change? Right? Because we see Dr. Quinte homing Doflamingo's father leave the Holy Land, left the Holy Land and his with his family and stuff like that. So as well, so it brings into a interesting, I guess, how I would say this, an interesting president. I was trying to find a word there, y'all. President of Celestial Dragons. Maybe some of them will change. I'm not gonna say all. For example, St. Charlos, I don't think he changed it at all, right? I think he too far gone. But it's gonna be interesting to see if how many change and how many doesn't. Like, are they gonna be more Celestial Dragons that jump ship? You know what I'm saying, or start treating others better in the story? It's just gonna be interesting to see because it's definitely Oda has definitely showed precedent of homing and Mosgard changing. Lastly, y'all, the thing I want to talk about, y'all, is a theory of mine is that I think the fishmen are going to be so important when Vegapunk's prediction of the world sinking into the sea becomes true, right? We know that's supposed to happen, and fishermen are really great underwater, right? I think that is likely to happen, and I think this is why this arc is so important, where the hatred disappearing. Fishermen are wanting to again have a connection with humans, because I think this moment in time when the world starts sinking into the sea, they're gonna come in clutch for humans, and it's gonna better the relationship between the two, and they're gonna be greater pastures, as I would say, in the future. So I think that's gonna be key, and that's why I think this arc is so important. Ultimately, y'all, man, this arc is great, man. I think it's overhated. I think, man, after watching it, man, back again, it is so much stuff, so much lore. It's definitely a different type of arc because the main villain, in my opinion, isn't the main villain. It's hatred itself, as I kind of explained, and that's that is a different way to write a villain in a sense. It's not a typical villain, and I really, really, really like that. Like, it had layers. This arc had so many layers to it. Really enjoy it, man, and I can't wait for the important information that we learned in Fishman Island to resurface later on into the story. As as the story progresses, man, it's gonna be huge, and people that sleep on this arc, they gonna be wishing that they didn't at that point in time, y'all.